Hey, what's up everybody? This is Kalan with White Glove Models and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing the No Name brand by SprayGunner Cordless Airbrush. So I originally received this airbrush from SprayGunner about a year and a half ago when I became a member of the SprayGunner Airbrush Club. I was very excited when I first got it because it's kind of a game changer. I mean, it allows you to airbrush basically anywhere. You don't have to worry about a cord or anything like that, an air compressor, because essentially this is your compressor all built in. Everything is all included in this package, including the cordless air compressor as well as this starter airbrush right here. It's a very basic airbrush. I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel about it because technically online you can go buy it right now for only $20. And I was thinking, $20 for an airbrush, is this thing going to be any good? I mean, I'll tell you right now, my friends, this thing is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and it's only $20 if I ever need to replace it online. I mean, you can't even get an O-ring or a needle sometimes for that. For other airbrushes like my Posh Talon, it costs a lot just to keep that thing maintained, and a lot of times even the O-rings can be quite expensive for a full kit on it. Now, if you're not familiar with SprayGunner.com, I recommend heading over there right now and checking out their website. You could get lost on their website for days. Trust me, I have. And it's a great resource because they are located right here in the United States. They're in Florida, and they go to all the different trade shows throughout the country all year long. And you can usually check them out on YouTube as well because they do have their very own YouTube account as well as a Facebook. So make sure you check out and see what kind of things they sometimes give away on YouTube as well as Facebook. So head over to spraygunner.com and check them out. But this video today is all about the No Name brand by SprayGunner cordless airbrush. The huge benefit to having a cordless airbrush is if you're not able to be at your paint booth, or your paint booth is like mine half the time where it's filled with all kinds of other stuff because it becomes a catch-all for everything that enters the hobby room, you can just grab your cordless airbrush, head out to even just outside. I've painted outside in a little makeshift booth that I've made out of cardboard boxes. Just about anything out in the garage, in the living room, wherever it may be. Say I just have a little cockpit that I have to spray paint one color on, and then I can get the rest with a paintbrush. I'll just break this out and I'll just spray it real quick and then clean this up. I mean, this is my go-to airbrush for just about everything, and I absolutely love it. So without further ado, let's head over to the workbench. We're going to tear this apart, show you the internal workings of everything, how everything goes together, what I use to clean it, as well as a new tool that I will be using in the future and have been using in the last few weeks to help make the cleaning of my airbrushes just that much more simpler, and I think a lot of you will appreciate that. But this airbrush, to be honest, is so easy and so simple to clean that is one of the reasons why I will always grab this before I grab one of my other airbrushes. So let's head over to the workbench. So this is the No Name brand by SprayGunner cordless airbrush. They call it an auto intellectual airbrush, auto stop, auto start. Pretty basic if you're talking about cordless airbrushes. So they do make various different ones that I'll show you on the screen. Some that you can hook up to your current airbrush. This particular one was, I think, it started out at about $75 or so. And now you can get this particular model for about $50 on SprayGunner.com. And the really cool thing about this one is it comes with an airbrush already attached that does come off, as you can see here, which is a very cool feature. You can also get a cord that you can attach to the top here, and then that cord can run to either this airbrush or any other airbrush that you decide to attach. So we'll talk more about this particular airbrush here in just a moment. But let's take a look at SprayGunner's website and see what other options they have, because the market for cordless airbrushes is growing and there's so many new options that are coming available almost every day. So I kind of just did a basic search for starter airbrush, and as you can see right here, we have the brush that I will be taking apart today. This is the one that I have, and it's only 20 bucks. So if anything was to ever go wrong with it, for 20 bucks you can just replace it, which is cheaper than buying a needle half the time. So there's only 2 reviews on it, which I thought was kind of interesting because I thought there were more reviews on this particular airbrush. But really cool, the different airbrushes that are available now, and the cordless compressors. This is the 2023 model, which we'll take a look at that in just a moment. Then of course you have the one that we're looking at today, and then this down here is the actual $50 complete setup for the cordless airbrush. Comes with the compressor, and it's a little different brush, which is probably actually even better than the one that came with mine. So here's some other stuff that they have, some different compressors as well, and then some paints, a few different airbrushes. But let's take a look at this 2023 model. It's definitely a little different. It has the hose, so you can attach different airbrushes to it as well, and it does come with its own airbrush. And this one I'm not too familiar with. I like the fact that it's got the little control on the bottom, so you can control how much air pressure is coming through it. Looks like a really nice looking airbrush. So this, I think this one was $75. $65 for the 2023 model, so not bad at all. And then just here's some information on it. Now let's take a look at this is basically for 50 bucks. This is essentially what I got. This is the older version, and you get that new brush with it, it looks like. So here's some information, and it's brand new, so there's not really any reviews, but I do like the look of that new brush. But the compressor is identical to the one that I have, so it's going to be pretty much identical to what I have. And then we do have the, you can see some of the different brushes that they have for, or spray guns for painting cars, different paints, compressors, all kinds of stuff that SprayGunner offers. And here we have some airbrushes and their kits. You can see the different brands there, parts for airbrushes, airbrush paints, all kinds of different paints, compressors, spray guns for automotive. You have automotive paints, other paints, surface preparation, accessories, all kinds of stuff, stencils, tapes, and masking, markers, and pencils and brushes. Just all different kinds of things that you would need for painting, which is why I absolutely love SprayGunner. So hopefully you guys can go check out the website. They even have pin vices, different tools, and things like that. So this particular model came in this nice little box. Everything was broken down. I threw away all the internal parts and the organizational parts because I was going to reuse this box for something else. But it comes all nicely, neatly packed and safely. You can keep it in this, store it in this. I use this airbrush so much that I literally just keep it together like this when not using it. I do store it with a little bit of cleaner in there just to keep things lubricated, and that would be the Medea. This is, I think, by Iwata. I'm not entirely sure. Airbrush cleaner. I keep just a drop of this in there just to kind of keep things lubricated, or so to speak. And then when I'm ready to start painting, I just spray it out. As you can see, my finger is a little bit wet there, and that is the cleaner that is coming out. So don't put anything like acetone in that. You'll ruin your airbrush and your seals. But the nice thing about this airbrush is it comes with a USB-C, and like this one right here. And I went ahead and marked this because I have a ton of different cords coming off of my power supply at my workbench, and then this one just plugs in. I usually have an adapter that I'll plug this into, and then it's just kind of hanging out by the workbench so that I can just quickly and easily plug in my airbrush when I need to charge it. The nice thing about this particular airbrush, and I think most of them that are on the market, especially with SprayGunner, is when you're airbrushing and the battery's getting low, it just doesn't stop on you altogether and then you've got to plug it in. It will stop, but it will let you continue to airbrush. So usually there's a lot of time before it goes completely dead. So I've actually had it start to lose battery power, and it'll, you'll be spraying along and it'll stop, and then you just, start back off over here and then continue going, it'll stop. And it allows you quite a bit of time, and it lets you know probably way ahead of time. I'd say maybe like 10-15 minutes of steady spray time before it goes completely dead, which is nice because then you can finish your project. And I've actually had that happen where I've needed to finish painting a project, and I was able to do so, and it wasn't a problem whatsoever. So really happy with that feature of it, because it allows you to finish what you're working on before having to plug it back in. And the other nice thing about it is with this USB cable, and if you have the I think it's like a 3.0 or whatever they call it, the higher speed chargers or adapter that you plug it into, this charges very fast, probably within about 30 minutes. So then you can be back using it. And the nice thing too, so if your battery does die and you need to clean your airbrush in between, you just simply take the battery off. So then you can take your airbrush and clean it while the battery is charging, which makes it very handy. I have seen some people put on a quick disconnect, but I didn't do that on this particular one just because personally, let me put this back on for you, I really like how this sits in my hand when I'm airbrushing. It's almost like having, like my Grex has a trigger and then a little handle on it, so it's almost like you have a steady handle to allow you to get in there and do some really nice fine work. And this is fully adjustable. It is a 2-stage, which is just amazing to me, because this is, I wasn't really sure what this airbrush was going to be like. And to be totally honest, this has been one of my favorite airbrushes just because of the simplicity of it and the ease of cleaning, as well as it, for being as cheap as it was, this particular airbrush has been a workhorse, and it just does wonders for everything that I need it to. I've had zero complaints about it, absolutely zero complaints. Whereas with my Pache airbrush, the Eagle Talon or whatever they called that one, I don't use that very much, and the reason for that is because of a lot of headaches with it and struggles with it. I've had zero issues with this airbrush. Now, I'm probably going to be jinxing myself, so knock on wood, but yes, I absolutely love this. The only thing that I did to it, and that was all my fault, is I damaged the threads on the little nozzle right here. So I will take a better picture of this so you guys can see it really well. But I damaged the nozzle because I over torqued it, and I ended up breaking the threads off inside. Now this is just a very itty bitty nozzle, and it's very easy to over torque. So now what I do is I usually hand tighten it, and I don't put it on too tight. Like I can just take it off right now if I was going to. I'm not going to because my needle's in there and I don't want to damage the needle. But anyways, when I did that, I contacted SprayGunner and said, hey, I can't find the part number for this particular one on the website, and they ended up just sending me a new nozzle for completely free, which is another great thing about SprayGunner, is they do take care of their customers. So keep that in mind whenever you are using a company online. You want to make sure that they are going to take care of you, and they are going to service the airbrush that they're selling you. So that's why I don't buy anything on Amazon when it comes to my airbrushes. SprayGunner will take if there's a major issue internally with the airbrush, you can send it to them, and they will either send it to the factory to have it either repaired or replaced, and then send it back to you. So great company to work with. So that being said, I'm going to put this gently back together. So before we tear it down, let's talk about the basic operation of this airbrush. It is a 2-stage, so you push down and it allows the air to flow through, which is a very decent amount of pressure. I honestly, I have no idea what the pressure is that comes out on the first pressure setting, because there are 2 settings on this particular model. So if I was to come down here on the base, there's this little button. So if you guys take a listen, you can kind of hear it speed up a little bit when I press the button. So now when you press that button, it puts it into a higher pressure mode, and it's going to push a little bit more paint out of the airbrush because it's like setting it at a higher air pressure. For the most part, I would say about 70% of my airbrush painting has been at the lower setting, and it works just fine. If I'm trying to put a primer through this particular airbrush, I will use the higher setting. And the two stage, again, you push down, and then as you're pushing down, most of you know this, you pull back to get your flow. So all that was doing was letting any of the airbrush cleaner that I had left in the cup spray out. And I love the control of this brush because you know, you can adjust this on the back. This is your trigger setting. So let me see. So as you can see, it's pushing it forward. So I can move this forward and just have a very nice thin amount of paint coming out, just like your standard airbrush that is a two-stage. A lot of them have this adjustment feature on it, which I absolutely love, because a lot of times when I first started airbrushing, I would just keep everything open all the way, full bore, and then just go to town like I was using a rattle can, and it was just making a huge mess, and I was putting down too much paint. And now that I've got more control, I can kind of do it without adjusting this, but sometimes I do adjust it forward anyways. That way I'm not putting too much paint out through the needle. That being said, those are your basic functions of it. Absolutely love the features of this particular airbrush for the price point. And I'm going to say it right now, you can't get a better airbrush for $50, especially one that comes with its own cordless compressor. So go check these out. Let's go ahead and start tearing this apart, and I'll kind of show you what everything looks like on the inside. So the first thing I usually do is I'll remove this back portion, exposing the needle and all of the adjustments here. And there's really not much in here. I've never actually taken this apart, and I don't ever plan to because I might not get it put back together. But there's really no need to even worry about cleaning the inside of this. You should never get paint all the way back in here. If you do, then you can clean it. But to be honest, I have not had a problem at all. I'll go ahead and remove my cap. You can remove the bowl. That's another nice feature about this particular airbrush, is that the bowl does come off. I don't know why I'm such a big fan of being able to remove the bowl, but it does make a huge difference. Next, I'll remove this front nozzle cap. And then I'll remove the nozzle. Next, you're going to take your wrench, and I probably don't even need it for this one, but for demonstration purposes I will show you. I'm going to very carefully retract my needle because I don't want to damage the tip of the needle, and then you just make sure you put the right size, which is the 1.7, and then I can go ahead and unscrew the little nozzle there. And as you can see now, the needle is just sitting there unsupported, so I want to be very, very careful that I don't drop this and damage that needle at this time. The next step is to loosen the nut that's holding the needle securely to the packing nut and needle spring. I believe that's what all of this part is called. There are different names for it, but for the most part, that is what holds the needle in place. So now, as you can see, the needle just moves freely as I pull back on the trigger. So I'll push forward. And you never want to pull your needle out backwards. That is a big no-no. The main reason for that, if there is any gunk on the end of the needle here, which there may be a little bit, there shouldn't be because this is clean, you can end up dragging that back through and kind of destroying anything back there. I wouldn't say it would totally destroy it, but you can end up getting clogs back there, things like that. And as you can see inside here, I'll just pull the needle straight up very carefully and just drag it straight out. And as you can see, everything is still fairly clean. There was a little bit of needle juice on there as well as some airbrush cleaner, and everything looks fine and dandy on the inside there as well. The big thing is that you want to make sure that your tip doesn't get damaged or that it's not bent, which is easy to figure out if you're just kind of casually spinning it around here. You don't notice any wibble wobble in it or anything like that. And also, if any portion of the needle is bent, it is basically bad and needs to be replaced. So we'll set that very carefully up here. Don't want that going anywhere. And basically at this phase, this is as far as I typically will tear this particular airbrush down. You can go farther, and we're going to continue to pull some things out of it so that you can get the general idea if you need to do a very, very thorough cleaning. But basically where it is at, when we do our cleaning video, you'll see this is basically where I tear it down to. I'll clean it and then make sure everything is nice and dry for the most part. Put some needle juice on the needle, throw the needle back in, going this direction this time. As things break down in the long run, you might have to tear it down even further because there are some packing nuts and different things inside here, as well as some different O-rings that might eventually need to be replaced. But as long as you're maintaining your airbrush properly and all that, these O-rings should last for a very long time, typically several years at the most, I would say. Some you might even last longer. So we'll go ahead and remove this nut here. And then you'll go ahead and remove this packing nut. And as you can see, I barely had it tightened, and there is a spring in here. Usually it's not all that springy, so things aren't going to go flying, but you do not want to lose it. So go ahead and just spin this off. Everything was finger tight, something you don't want to torque down too much, just because you can end up damaging the airbrush in the long run. And this is under zero tension at the moment, so we'll go ahead and pull all of this out. And as you can see, it is very, very clean. All of this right here is 3 different parts, and we'll pull them all apart here in just a moment. Be careful not to lose your trigger at this moment because the trigger is loose and will come out. So just be careful you don't lose that. And you also want to make sure that it is put back in the proper way. And then it's just fairly simple. You pull it apart and you've got your main body here, a spring, and then this section here, which is what tightens everything down and securely into the airbrush. Now, I probably should have done this a lot sooner, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the airbrush from the battery and just put this off to the side. Next, we're going to be removing the trigger, and I'll show you up close here. Hopefully this shows up on camera fairly well, but you've got the little section in there. There is a black O-ring inside as well. What you want to do is just very simply, you don't have to make sure it's fully lined up, but usually I'll just make it kind of lined up like that in the middle. Then you're going to pull straight up and out, and I'll show you here on the bottom as we do that. Everything just pulls straight out, and you've got your full trigger assembly right there, and now you can see through the other side. And there is that O-ring. I've never removed that O-ring. There's no reason to at this time. If that O-ring does get damaged and you're leaking air around there, then I would suggest doing so. But there's kind of a look inside as well. And that is essentially as far as we are going to dismantle this airbrush today. So there is another packing nut inside. I'm not going to remove that because right now this airbrush flows very nicely. Haven't had any issues with it, and I don't want to compromise that. So I'm not going to mess with that packing nut that's deep down inside there until I actually have to. So this completes disassembly for this particular airbrush. Now we'll go ahead and put everything back together, and I'll just do that fairly quickly. You'll see the whole process of me doing that. And then I will go ahead and tear it back down and do a full cleaning of it for you guys, and that will complete this video. Basically, the reassembly is just the reverse of everything that we just did. Okay, and everything is put back together again, and we're ready to rock and roll. So now we're going to go ahead and tear everything back apart and do a full cleaning of the airbrush. Usually when I'm cleaning it, I'm going to go ahead and kick the airbrush up to high. And what I'll do is I'll bring over my little cleaning stand, and this one you got to kind of pick it up because it doesn't, the battery tends to get in the way a little bit. So we'll go ahead and run the product through here. I'll go ahead and remove the cap, and usually about this time I'll just bring over a couple of clean cups. I like to make sure that I have some clean ones, and I'll take my 50-50 alcohol water mix, pour it in. In this first cup I'll go ahead and fill that up almost all the way, and then I'll just drop my parts into it as I'm going along. Alright, so now I can hear that the cup is empty. And then I'm pretty much done with that. I'm not going to mess with that too much anymore. What I'll be doing next is, this is going to be a little tricky to show you guys everything here on the little station that we have, but I'm going to do my best. So I'll put this over here. And this is my waste tank, essentially, if you want to think of it like that. Then we've got our parts that are going to be dirty, that have paint on them, going in over here. Next, what I'll do is I'll take this alcohol mixture, fill it back up. Then I'm going to just put my finger over the little cap here, and I'll back flush everything. And I usually do this like 3 to 5 times, depending on how dirty it is. So you get the idea. I'm not going to do it each time. Then I'll go ahead and put a little bit more cleaner in there, and I'll take my regular Q-tip here, and I'll just kind of clean the inside and swirl around, getting the entire cup. Next, I'll go ahead and use the other end, the clean end, and do this all over again, and cleaning it all the way up. Next, this is where the alcohol pads come in handy. I'll go ahead and open one up. And then what I'm going to do is clean the inside of the cup really, really well, just to make sure I get all the paint out of the inside of the cup, and then I'll clean the outside, because typically, like when I'm airbrushing, somehow I get paint all over the outside of the cup. So I'll make sure that everything gets a good, nice rub down and that there's no paint. And then what I'll do is I'll check inside. There's still a little bit. I'll just dump that out. I'm going to go ahead and fill it up again. Back flush, dump it out, fill it up just a little bit again, and then I'm going to spray through the nozzle again. And I probably should be using my little doohickey for this, my little cleaning pot. And again, right now it's on the low setting, so I'll go ahead and push the button, kick it up to the high speed. And I'll run it completely through until it's empty. Then I'm just going to start dismantling the airbrush. We'll take the little cap off first, throw it in my little bin of 50-50 alcohol water mix. I'm going to unscrew the back here. This is the little adjustment part, and this doesn't really ever need to go in any cleaner or anything. You shouldn't have any paint back there. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen my nut. And this is that nut that just secures the needle down. And then I'll remove the nozzle, little nozzle cap thing here. And that's going to take a little bath. And I can bring over my handy dandy wrench. Unscrew the nozzle. And then I'll push the needle through, again going this direction so you're not dragging anything through. At this point, I always put the needle right there out of the way so it's not going to get damaged or anything like that, because I'm not usually going to put stuff here. The next step that I'm going to do is something a lot of people probably don't do or they forget to do, and that is flushing the whole airbrush out. This is 100% alcohol. Try to film this so you guys can see. So this is kind of where this comes in handy, this little tray, because this kind of makes a mess sometimes. For this I have to remove, for this particular one, I'm just going to go ahead and remove the actual cap. This doesn't usually need to get cleaned because it shouldn't have any paint on it, but I'm going to put it over here safely out of the way on the little tray. And I keep everything usually contained in the tray just so I don't lose it. Then I'm going to basically take this here, put it up on the inside, and let's see if you guys can even see what's happening here. So I'm just going to gently squeeze and let it flush out. Let's see if you can see. I'm going to let it spill over so you guys can see on this other camera here. So I'm going to let it flow out. So I just do a little squeeze and it flows out. And what this is doing is it's essentially flushing the entire body of the airbrush. I do this maybe, depending on what type of paint I've been using, 3 to 4 times. I'll also use lacquer thinner on this if I'm using really crazy lacquers like All Clad 2. Just because it works really super well on getting the body cleaned out. And then you just want to make sure that you close your cap, because this being 100% alcohol is going to evaporate if you don't do that. Next thing you can do, and this is why it's still attached to the battery, is I'm going to blow it out. Typically most of the cleaner is going to just drain automatically out. Sometimes you might get a little kept up inside of here, but as you can see, nothing is left over. So now I can go ahead and remove my cap. I'm pretty positive my cap is fairly clean at this point, but it is going to need a little bit more touch up, but it can just take a little bath here in the cleaner right there. The next step, I'm not going to waste another alcohol prep pad, but all you got to do is just take your alcohol prep pad, take a brand new one typically, and what I'll do is I'll clean the needle going this direction. You never want to push down because you'll end up damaging the needle, so except for down here, and I make sure that I don't go anywhere near the tip when I'm going this way. And then I'll just continue to go up, cleaning it, and this usually will get about 99% of everything off of your needle. And so do that, and then I'll just put the needle back over here and let it hang out until we're ready to put it back in. So now comes the fun part, and this is basically all you're going to have to tear down. You're not going to have to go any further than this when you're cleaning it out. Typically what I'll do is take my little dental cleaner here and I'll rub it inside. Now this isn't going to go all the way back like your other ones, like the other cleaners, but it's going to get the gist of stuff out. Then you can come back with the longer one, and I'll give it a good dunk there, and then run it all the way through the airbrush, and make sure that it kind of goes back inside the body here a little bit towards the actual trigger, and I'll just run it through a few times and make sure that everything gets good and brushed out. Usually maybe about 2 to 3 times. You don't want to overdo it, and I definitely wouldn't use anything like a wire brush. Just use these little nylon ones. And then what I'll do again is I'll flush it out, is put it in that little hole and just flush it out really good, and that should be plenty of cleaning that out. The next step would be to take a little Q-tip like this one with the pointy end, and I rub it on the inside and twist, make sure I get any paint residue that might be hanging out in there, and then just make sure everything is super clean. If you need to get it wet, just use your clean alcohol over here and just rub it in there. If you need to use more than one Q-tip, go and do that. This is the part of the cup that I don't actually use the other Q-tips, because they'll leave those fibers around, and you don't want those fibers hanging out, because those fibers can end up clogging the airbrush in the long run. So there is that. This is basically clean, and what you can do then is just I just wipe everything down really good with a towel. Make sure that I've got everything cleaned up really, really well, and there's no paint residue left behind. So as you saw there, my trigger came out. So it's going to be a little tricky to put back inside, but the easiest thing on this airbrush to do is you just grab a hold of this with your fingernail, and then make sure you're inserting this the right way. And there you go. Now it's back in. Make sure that it's flowing and working properly. Make sure that this nut is tight. And basically everything now is super clean. And what I'll do then, and might be overkill, but it's just the way that I clean my airbrushes, is I'll take the Iwata airbrush cleaner, do a similar flush to it, just a little bit. You don't need a whole lot. This airbrush cleaner should last you a very long time. And then I'll just put it over here, out of the way, and it'll just sit there until I finish cleaning everything else. The next big thing, of course, you're going to have the cup, which again, take a clean Q-tip and just I just do circles all the way around, making sure everything is super clean. And if you need to do the outside, you do the outside as well, and just make sure that this area is clean as well as the threads. Then I will take a clean alcohol prep pad, wipe it out one more time, making sure that you have gotten every nook and cranny, because this is where I don't like to have any paint chips as well, or any type of dried paint in any portion of the cup or anything like that. In fact, the whole airbrush, you shouldn't have any. And then you can just clean it really quickly with a towel as well, just to dry it off. Or you can just use a paper towel as well. And then this can just get put right here. And then we'll start cleaning the nozzles. Doesn't really matter what order you do these in. This one I can usually manage to get the larger brush in and out. I like to dip it sometimes. And just a couple of times through it should be enough to get any paint out of it. And I don't ever really get any paint on the outside here, so you shouldn't really have to clean that, but if you do, that's just super easy to clean up as well. And then I'll just put this off to the side as well. This also comes in really handy for grabbing parts out of here. And then typically on these nozzles, I can kind of go through with the little dental cleaner. And I'll swirl around a bit, make sure, trying to get as much as I can, and then I'll just start working my way down in size, typically starting with the larger one. Want to make sure I get the outside here really clean. And then this does not like to go through there. This is the small size, and this is where all these little pieces of hair come off, is trying to do that. So typically these little dental cleaners are going to be your best friend, and they are small enough to get in there and do a really good job and then clean all of this out. And then if you want to go as far, this is where you have to be careful, because this is metal. You don't want to expand this cap at all. So you just gently put this in here, and then you can kind of scrape out any paint that might be in there, and then just put that off to the side. Then you have the nozzle. This nozzle for this particular airbrush is super, super tiny. Trying to get anything in here is next to impossible, which is where this tool comes in. And my tip is a little bit, because I've dropped this so many times or poked it through different things. So you just got to be careful. Put it through. I can see it come through the end. Don't push too hard. Just gently scraping the sides, getting all of that clean. And a lot of times, like, you can pull it off on the paper here and you'll see a little bit of paint, usually not too much. Then you can just do that again. And typically that is all you need to do to clean this. Sometimes I'll try to get one of these guys in here and just swirl a bit, but this is so tiny that you don't get to go in very far. But for the most part, that should be clean because it's been soaking in that alcohol mixture, and we've flushed through it a few times with the actual airbrush itself. So that being said, that is clean, and the last part we have to do is the cap here. And a lot of times I'll just take this dental cleaner, clean out the hole in the cap, because you want good airflow. You want that to be able to breathe and allow air to come through. And then you can take a Q-tip, clean your sides, clean the entire cap even. And so a lot of times I'll get paint up here, and that just usually wipes straight off, no problem. And then use your paper towel or your towel, cotton towel or microfiber towel, and just clean it up really, really good. And you're all ready to put everything back together. And I'm going to take the nozzle, install this first. Again, going about finger tight, and then taking my wrench, gently putting it on there, finding where the thread or where it lines up, and then just barely moving it until I feel it starting to snug. And just, again, do not over snug it or anything like that, because you will damage it very, very easily. Then you'll take your little nozzle, fluid nozzle, and the cap, You don't have to put this nut on. You can kind of start here and gently push it through. And then again, I just gently continue through. Make sure you don't hit any parts for the trigger, and gently go in here. And then a lot of times about this point is where you can take your needle juice, throw a little bit of needle juice on here, and then just gently work your way down. And I see it coming through. And tighten this nut down. And you can grab the back, the adjustment sleeve, and just tighten this down. Then you can throw your cup back on. And then the cup lid. Push that down, and everything should work just fine. And typically the last thing that I will do before storing my airbrush for a while is I'll go ahead and take just a little bit of the airbrush cleaner and just put maybe a drop in there or two. There we go. Just enough to kind of keep things a little bit wet, and then run it through. You don't want a whole bunch of liquid just hanging out in there, but just enough to kind of maybe keep things a little bit wet. And then I'll put my cap on, especially if you're not going to be using the airbrush for a while. That's kind of how I store it, and I haven't had any problems with it at all, as long as it's the airbrush cleaner. Don't keep anything like alcohol or any other cleaners in there, because that could end up damaging your O-rings as well as other parts of the airbrush. So that is basically it when it comes to cleaning this airbrush. Super, super simple. Now I'm going to talk to you about a new way of cleaning the airbrush, which has made this portion a little redundant, but super easy to do, and I think I get a very thorough clean. So it just kind of makes this part a little bit easier, I would say, and it's adding an extra step to it, but I think in the end you're getting a very, very good clean on your airbrush. So let me pull it out and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is an ultrasonic cleaner, and I found this on Amazon for fairly cheap. I think this one was about $35, $40. You can get cheaper ones. I got this one just because I really liked the reviews on it, and just thought it would work the best for what I need it for, which is more than just cleaning my airbrush. And for the most part, I've used this about 6 times so far in cleaning my airbrushes, along with putting them back together and cleaning them with the, making sure everything is brushed out and cleaned properly. And it's actually been a huge help and does a really good job at getting a deep, deep clean. This particular one, I'm not going to plug it in right now. There is a plug that plugs in right here, but you have a timer. It gives you anywhere from like 1 minute to up to, I think, about 6 to 8 minutes. And so you just hit that, it sets the time for the cleaning mode, and then you just hit that and it starts cleaning. So just a real quick tutorial on how this goes into play with cleaning the airbrushes. I will show you. The main thing is you get this basket that comes along with it, and I highly recommend it. There is a fill line. You max fill up to here. So we'll actually show you what we fill this with. Now, they do sell all kinds of cleaners for it. Essentially what I've been using, and I got this from a few other people on the HobbyLink International community, like Mark Schumann, he had mentioned using Simple Green, which I use a 50-50 mix. So I took the Simple Green, just filled it up to here, and then added the rest in distilled water, making sure that it's a good 50-50 mix. And then what I will do is I will take this and fill it up to here, and I have some, this is all clean. I do have a jar that has some that has been used, and I'll show you that. So this jar, if you look, there's a little bit of sediment there at the bottom, and this is from cleaning about 6 times, but overall it still looks fairly good. And what I'll do is, this is just enough to fill up to that max line. I'll pour it out, making sure I don't get all of this gunk back into the ultrasonic cleaner, and it works out very, very well. And then once I have that filled, I'll take my basket, I'll put that inside, and then it's just a matter of tearing apart your airbrush. And so let's just say, for instance, I just spent the last hour or so airbrushing. This is dirty, it's been used well today, and I'm all done with my airbrushing for the day. What I will do just take the parts and start putting them into the cleaner. And so you're going to have to imagine that this is filled with the simple green mixture, the 50-50 mixture. I'm not going to actually do that just because then I'd have to put it back in the container, and this is just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to basically tear the airbrush down to its basic parts. And you of course don't want to put the battery inside. No reason to really clean this. You can do that with an alcohol prep pad. And then I'll remove, this is another part that I actually don't even put into the ultrasonic cleaner, but I'll go ahead and loosen this. And you can remove it completely if you want. You don't necessarily have to. Then I'll remove my cap and the fluid nozzle. Then I'll remove the nozzle. And the nozzle is the tricky one in this because it's always going to fall down through a hole, which it just did. And I think maybe out of the 6 times I've used this, it hasn't fallen down once, but it's not a big deal. So the needle does need to come out. So you'll push your needle through. So you'll pull your needle through. And then I'll gently place the needle in the vat. And if you want to tear it down even further, you can. It's not totally necessary. Sometimes you can just back this out a little ways and pull your trigger out, and then just set everything inside here. Again, we're pretending that this is full of simple green 50-50, so simple green and water 50-50 mix. Then put your lid on, hit your timer. I typically go to the highest amount of time and then just hit start and walk away. It cleans it. And then what I'll do is sometimes I'll run 2 cycles. It just depends on my mood, or if I leave it in there for a while. Then what I'll do is I'll take this out, pull the basket out, drain the simple green back into this jar, and then I will fill it with water. So just 100% water. Put everything back in, put the lid on, hit the timer for the highest setting, and then run it in just plain water for another cycle. After that, I can take everything out. Everything should be nice and clean. And then I'll just really quickly, I'll just show you kind of how the whole process goes. We'll come back over with our little cleaning kit here. And I don't need to flush it because essentially I was just flushing it with the ultrasonic cleaner. So I'll clean everything out with the bristles. You don't necessarily have to, but I do it just because it makes me feel better. And then make sure that all of these parts are clean and all of that. Usually, I mean, with the ultrasonic cleaner, you don't even need to use any of this stuff, but I'll run it through anyway just to make sure, just like we did previously in the video. And then I can just put everything back together. All right, and there you go. Everything is put back together and nice and clean and just really, really simple. So I've been very, very happy with the results of the ultrasonic cleaner. And here again is the ultrasonic cleaner. Again, I don't know the name of it. It's a no-name brand or whatever from, it just says ultrasonic cleaner. I can't remember the brand name, but it works really, really well. Super cheap on Amazon. This wasn't the cheapest. I did do a lot of research before buying one and ended up going with this one just because it had great reviews, over like 17,000 reviews or something like that. And it wasn't terribly expensive and it does its job. Another good thing that this one is good for is cleaning your glasses and jewelry, and that's kind of why I went with it. But here we go, the star of the show today, the no-name brand cordless airbrush from SprayGunner.com. Again, you can currently buy this particular setup for about $50. If you want just the airbrush, you can get it for $20 at SprayGunner.com. The compressor itself, when you buy the compressor, that $50 gets you the complete setup, and you can see it here on the screen right now. There are other options out there, especially if you want to use your own personal airbrush. There's a bunch of different options on the website as well. Kind of my final thoughts on this particular no-name brand. cordless airbrush is just, it's absolutely 5 stars, 5 out of 5. I mean, this thing is amazing. I love it. I would buy another one for sure. And I most definitely am interested in looking at some of the other ones that SprayGunner is coming out with. They do have other no-name brands, and just feel free to check out the website. All right, well, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit longer than I originally anticipated, but that's kind of how I do things on my channel if you're not familiar with me, especially when I'm passionate about something that I'm working on. And SprayGunner, it might sound like I'm a walking advertisement for them, but I'll tell you what, there's a reason for that. Go over to SprayGunner. Make sure you use that affiliate link down below, because I am a brand ambassador and an affiliate for SprayGunner.com, just because they are absolutely amazing with customer service and whatnot. And the first order you ever place with them, you will see what I'm talking about when it comes to customer service. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I really hope you learned something. I know I always do when I watch other people's videos, and I truly appreciate it. Don't forget to smash that like button if you want to, or to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any new content that might be coming. I know it's been a while since I put out videos. It's just I've been recovering from surgery, so I'm kind of getting back into the swing of things and trying to get some different projects back onto the workbench so that we can finish them up. So I do appreciate your guys' time and all of your comments and all of that. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.